On November 3rd, 2023, 6 weeks after my husband's funeral, my son Carlton looked me in the eye and said, "Mom, you need to be out by Friday. Jessica and I are moving in. I'm Vivian Banks. I'm 68 years old." I said, "Okay." Then I packed my things and left the house I'd lived in for 44 years. What Carlton didn't know was that I'd spent those 44 years as more than just a housewife. And what he was about to discover would cost him everything. Let me tell you how I went from homeless widow to the woman who changed elder abuse laws in Pennsylvania. The autumn rain was coming down in sheets on September 22nd, 2023, when we buried Thomas Michael Banks at Sacred Heart Cemetery in Philadelphia. I stood beside the mahogany casket, the expensive one Carlton had insisted on, $8,700 he'd charged to Thomas's credit card without asking me, and watched the rainwater pool on top of the polished wood. 217 people came to pay their respects. I counted them. Counting has always been how I cope with grief. Thomas was 72 when his heart gave out. We'd been married for 44 years, together for 46. I was 23 when we met at the accounting firm where I worked as a junior analyst. He was 27, already a senior associate, charming and ambitious. He said he loved how I could spot a $0.37 error in a 1,000-line spreadsheet. I thought that meant he respected my mind. Turns out, he just liked having a wife who was good with numbers, but wouldn't ask too many questions about his own. Carlton stood in the front row with his wife Jessica and their 2 children, Sophie, 12, and Max, 9. My son wore a 2400 Tom Ford suit. I recognized it from the invoice I'd accidentally seen on his desk 3 months earlier. His face was appropriately somber, but I noticed something that made my stomach tighten. He kept checking his phone, not occasionally, every 3 to 4 minutes. At one point, I saw him exchange a look with Jessica. She nodded almost imperceptibly. It was the kind of wordless communication that comes from planning something together. I filed that observation away. The minister spoke about Thomas's success as a commercial real estate consultant, his 40-year career, his generous spirit. I didn't mention that Thomas and I hadn't shared a bedroom in 7 years, or that I'd found evidence of 3 separate affairs in his desk drawer 5 years ago. You don't speak ill of the dead, especially not in front of 217 witnesses. What I did notice, Douglas Harper, Thomas's attorney of 30 years, standing at the back of the church, crying harder than seemed appropriate for a professional relationship. He left before the cemetery, claiming an emergency with another client. I counted that as observation number 2. The house at 847 Oakwood Drive had never felt so large or so empty. 6 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, 4,200 square feet of space that Thomas had insisted we needed when Carlton was born. "Room to grow," he'd said. We never had more children. Carlton had been a difficult baby, a demanding toddler, and an expensive teenager. Now it was just me, rattling around in rooms full of furniture I'd never particularly liked, but had never felt entitled to change. Carlton started visiting every day, beginning Monday, September 25th. He'd arrive around 2:00 p.m., always with his leather messenger bag, always with a concerned expression that looked practiced in a mirror. "Mom, I've been thinking about your situation," he said on day 1, settling into Thomas's favorite chair, the $3,400 Herman Miller that Thomas had bought without consulting me. "This house is a lot for one person." "I've managed for a week," I said, pouring him coffee in the $89 Wedgwood cup Jessica had given us for Christmas, the set Thomas had immediately declared too fancy for everyday use. "A week, yes, but long-term? The property taxes alone are $18,500 a year. The heating bills will be killer this winter. And when was the last time the roof was inspected?" He pulled out a brochure from his bag. "Maple Gardens Retirement Community." I took the liberty of scheduling a tour for Thursday. 1-bedroom units start at just $2,100 a month, utilities included. They have activities, people your age, a dining room so you wouldn't have to cook. "I like cooking," I said. "Mom," he leaned forward with what I'm sure he thought was a gentle, caring expression. "Be realistic. You're 68 years old. You've never worked outside the home. Dad handled all the finances. This house is more responsibility than you can manage." Never worked outside the home. I'd worked for 6 years as an accountant before Thomas asked me to quit when Carlton was born. I'd managed this household's entire budget for 44 years. I'd balanced Thomas's business accounts when his own bookkeeper quit. I'd found the $47,000 error in his taxes that saved him from an IRS audit. But in Carlton's memory, I'd never worked. I smiled. "I'll think about it." He seemed satisfied with that and left, forgetting his messenger bag. I didn't stop him. I waited until his BMW pulled out of the driveway. Then I looked inside. Property listings. 7 of them, all for houses in our neighborhood. All marked with Jessica's handwriting. 3 BR potential and good bones. Flip. And a yellow legal pad with a single line in Carlton's handwriting. "Wait for will reading. Play nice until secured." I took photos of everything with my phone, then placed the bag exactly where he'd left it. The next day, Tuesday, September 26th, Carlton returned for the bag. "Oh, thank God. I thought I'd lost it at the office." "You're always welcome here," I said. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Thanks, Mom. Oh, and I spoke to Douglas Harper. He says there's some complexity with Dad's estate. Might take a few weeks to sort through everything." "Complexity?" "Legal stuff. Property holdings, investment accounts. Nothing for you to worry about. I'll handle it." Nothing for me to worry about. I'd been married to Thomas for 44 years, but apparently his estate was none of my business. I smiled again. "Thank you, sweetheart. That's very thoughtful." After he left, I called Douglas Harper's office. His secretary, a woman named Mary Ann, whom I'd met at least a dozen times at firm events, answered on the second ring. "Harper and Associates. How may I help you?" "Mary Ann, it's Vivian Banks. I was hoping to schedule a meeting with Douglas about Thomas's estate." A pause. Too long. "Mrs. Banks, I'm sorry, but Mr. Harper is on extended leave. Family emergency. He won't be available for the foreseeable future." "Family emergency? Is everything all right?" "I'm not at liberty to discuss it, but he's left all his current cases with our associate, Mr. Brennan. Would you like me to schedule with him?" "No, thank you. I'll wait for Douglas." I hung up and immediately searched Douglas Harper Philadelphia on my laptop. His firm's website showed him as active and listed him attending a charity gala just last Thursday, 6 days ago. His personal Facebook page, which I'd never looked at before, showed a post from yesterday. "Great round of golf at Pinehurst Country Club with the partners. Extended leave. Family emergency." Someone was lying. On Sunday, October 1st, 9 days after the funeral, Carlton organized what he called a family dinner at the house. He and Jessica arrived at 5:00 p.m. with Sophie and Max, plus an unexpected guest, Douglas Harper. Douglas was 74 years old, distinguished-looking with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses. He'd always been kind to me at Thomas's company events, asking about my garden and actually listening to my answers. But tonight, he wouldn't meet my eyes. "Douglas, I'm so glad your family emergency resolved," I said, setting down a platter of roast chicken. He flinched. "Yes. Well, these things happen." "Absolutely. I saw your Facebook post from the golf course. I'm glad you could still enjoy yourself during such a difficult time." His face went red. Carlton jumped in quickly. "Mom, Douglas was kind enough to come discuss Dad's estate. Why don't we eat first, then talk business?" During dinner, Jessica dominated the conversation, talking about her latest marketing campaign for a luxury car brand. The demographics are fascinating. High net worth individuals aged 45 to 65, primarily male, investment portfolios averaging $3 million. I noticed she kept glancing at Carlton, who kept glancing at Douglas, who kept glancing at his water glass. Sophie and Max were quiet, pushing food around their plates. Good kids. I'd always liked my grandchildren, even if Carlton and Jessica only brought them around when they needed me to babysit. After dinner, we moved to the living room. Carlton cleared his throat. "Mom, Douglas has been reviewing Dad's estate documents. There's something we need to discuss." Douglas pulled papers from his briefcase, his hands trembling slightly. "Mrs. Banks, Vivian, your husband's will is straightforward. He wanted to ensure his assets were distributed in a way that would be manageable." "Manageable," I repeated. "Yes. Given the complexity of the investments and properties, Thomas felt it would be best if everything went to Carlton, who has the financial expertise to handle it properly. He slid a document across the coffee table. I picked it up and read, I, Thomas Michael Banks, being of sound mind and body, do hereby bequeath to my son, Carlton James Banks, the sum total of my estate, including but not limited to the primary residence at 847 Oakwood Drive, Philadelphia, PA, all investment accounts, all business holdings, and all personal property, with the exception of $50,000 in cash assets to be given to my wife, Vivian Ann Banks, for her personal use. The room went silent. $50,000, I said quietly. And you're welcome to stay in the house temporarily, Carlton added quickly, until you find a suitable place. I know this is a lot to process, but Dad knew I'd take care of his legacy properly. You have to understand, Mom, you've never dealt with investments or property management. Dad was protecting you from that burden. I looked at Douglas. This is real? He nodded, still not meeting my eyes. I witnessed it myself. Signed and notarized on March 15th, 2023. March 15th, 6 months before Thomas died, right after he'd been diagnosed with the heart condition that would kill him. I set the document down carefully and stood up. I see. Well, thank you for letting me know. Douglas, could you leave a copy for my records? Carlton looked surprised by my calm response. Mom, I know this isn't what you expected. It's fine, sweetheart. Your father always knew best. I smiled at Jessica, who was watching me with barely concealed triumph. Would anyone like dessert? I made apple pie. After they left, Carlton taking the copy of the will with him, for safekeeping, I sat alone in the living room until midnight. Then I went to Thomas's study, the one room he'd always kept locked, and used the key I'd copied 15 years ago when I'd gotten suspicious about his first affair. In the bottom drawer of his filing cabinet, behind 10 years of tax returns, I found a manila envelope marked Important, Vivian. Inside was a business card, Michael Williams, Williams & Associates, Estate Planning and Trust Law, and a note in Thomas's handwriting. If you're reading this, something has gone wrong. Call Michael. Trust no one else. T. I took a picture of the card and the note. Then I put everything back exactly as I'd found it. It was 1:17 a.m. I'd been a widow for 10 days, and I was starting to understand that my husband had been playing a longer game than any of us realized. November 3rd, 2023, Friday, 2:47 p.m. I was in the garden, deadheading the last of the autumn roses, when Carlton's BMW pulled into the driveway. Jessica was with him. They both got out wearing expressions I'd seen before. The same ones they'd worn when they told Sophie she couldn't get a puppy because of Jessica's allergies. Firm, final, non-negotiable. Carlton was carrying 2 large suitcases. My suitcases. The ones from the hall closet. Mom, we need to talk, he said, not bothering with pleasantries. I set down my gardening shears and removed my gloves. Of course, come inside. No, Jessica's voice was sharp. This won't take long. I stayed where I was, dirt under my fingernails, the November wind biting through my cardigan. Waiting. Carlton set the suitcases down on the lawn. Mom, I got the promotion. Senior partner at Whitmore & Associates. The announcement is Monday, and we need to be settled in the right neighborhood by then. This house is perfect for our image. Congratulations, I said. That's wonderful news. Which is why we need you out by tonight. The words hung in the cold air between us. Tonight, I repeated. Jessica stepped forward, pulling out her phone. We found you a lovely apartment at Maple Gardens. 1 bedroom, 700 square feet, $2,100 a month. I've already put down the deposit, $4,200. You can pay us back from your $50,000. She showed me photos. Beige walls, laminate floors, a kitchenette with 2 burners, a window overlooking a parking lot. It's available immediately, Jessica continued. I have the keys. We can drop you off on our way to dinner with the partners tonight. Jessica, I kept my voice level. This is my home. Actually, Mom, Carlton said, pulling papers from his jacket pocket. According to Dad's will, This is my home. I've been generous letting you stay these past 6 weeks, but it's time. I have the movers coming tomorrow morning to start bringing our things over." He handed me the papers. The same Will Douglas had shown me, now with an addendum. Property transfer effective immediately upon Carlton Banks's request. "But the will said I could have $50,000, I said. "Right, for your personal use, not for property rights." Carlton's voice took on the patronizing tone he used when explaining things to Sophie. "Mom, you have to be realistic. You're 68 years old. You never worked. You don't understand real estate law or property management. Dad knew that. That's why he left everything to me." Never worked. This was the second time he'd said it. I wondered if he'd practiced the phrase, if it was meant to make me feel small. It was working. "Carlton, please. Can't we discuss this like adults? Maybe I could rent a room from you, or—" "No." Jessica's voice was flat. "Carlton and I need our privacy. We're planning to start trying for another baby, and we can't do that with you underfoot. Besides, you'd be much happier around people your own age. No responsibilities, no stress." "No home," she meant. I looked at my son, really looked at him. At 42, he'd become everything Thomas had wanted. Successful, confident, ambitious. He had Thomas's jawline, Thomas's ability to make ruthless decisions sound reasonable. He didn't have Thomas's guilt. "How long do I have to pack?" I asked quietly. Carlton checked his watch, a Rolex Submariner 13,450 that Thomas had given him for his 40th birthday. "It's almost 3 o'clock. We need to leave by 6 on clock for dinner, so 3 hours should be plenty." 3 hours? For 44 years. "Mom, don't be dramatic. You don't need to take everything. Just clothes and personal items. The furniture stays. It's technically part of the property value." Jessica was already texting someone. "I'm calling movers for your things. They can put everything in storage until you're ready to sort through it. $189 a month for a 10 by 10 unit. Also deductible from your $50,000. I did the math automatically. $2,100 rent plus $189 storage plus utilities plus food plus. The $50,000 would last maybe 18 months if I was careful. Then what? "I'll start packing," I said. Carlton's face relaxed. "Good. I knew you'd be reasonable. Mom, this is actually better for you. You'll have freedom, independence, no more worrying about property taxes or roof repairs or—" "Carlton," I cut him off. "I said I'll pack. That's all I'm saying right now." Something in my tone made him step back. For just a moment I saw uncertainty flicker across his face. Then Jessica took his arm. "Come on, honey. Let's check the house and make sure nothing's damaged before we move in." They walked past me into my home, Carlton's home now, talking about which rooms would be Sophie's and Max's, where they'd put the new sectional sofa Jessica had been eyeing, whether the master bathroom needed renovation. I stood in the garden until 3:17 p.m. Then I went inside and started packing. By 6:43 p.m. I was sitting on a sagging mattress in room 114 of the Sunset Inn Motel on Route 13. The room cost $67 a night. The carpet was brown and sticky. The shower had black mold in the corners. Through the paper-thin walls, I could hear a couple arguing in Spanish. Jessica had driven me here in her Mercedes ML350, 64-900 2022 model, making small talk about Sophie's violin lessons while I sat in the back seat with my 2 suitcases and a box of photos. "Here we are," she'd said brightly, pulling up to the motel. "Just temporary, of course, until the apartment is ready Monday." She'd handed me an envelope. $300 in cash. That should cover the motel and food for the weekend. We'll deduct it from your $50,000, obviously. Then she'd driven away, leaving me standing in a parking lot that smelled like cigarettes and exhaust fumes. Now at 8:52 p.m. I sat on the bed and took inventory. What I had. 2 suitcases of clothes. 1 box of photos. My phone, paid through Thomas's account, which Carlton would surely cancel. My purse with $87 in cash and 3 credit cards, also connected to accounts Carlton now controlled. The business card from Thomas's desk. Michael Williams, attorney, what I'd lost. My home of 44 years, my furniture, my garden, my wedding china, my grandmother's jewelry still in the master bedroom safe. My dignity, I didn't cry. I'd stopped crying when Thomas died. Or maybe years before that, when I'd found evidence of his affairs and he'd convinced me I was overreacting. Instead, I did what I always did when overwhelmed. I made lists, but as I sat there, something Thomas had said 3 years ago came back to me. We'd been at a hospital, visiting his business partner Leonard Hayes, who'd had a minor stroke. On the drive home, Thomas had been unusually quiet. Then he'd said, "Vivian, if anything happens to me, if I die or get sick or lose my memory, I need you to promise me something." "What?" "Don't trust Carlton." I'd laughed. "Thomas, that's our son." "I know. That's what scares me." He'd gripped the steering wheel tighter. "He's got my worst qualities and none of my conscience. If something happens to me, he'll come for everything, and he'll be charming about it." "You're being paranoid." "Maybe. But promise me anyway. If things seem wrong, if Carlton does something that doesn't feel right, you'll fight back. You're smarter than you think you are, Viv. Stronger, too." I'd dismissed it as one of Thomas's melodramatic moods. He'd been drinking that night. But now, sitting in a $67 a night motel room, I realized Thomas had been trying to warn me. More than that, he'd been trying to prepare me. I picked up my phone and dialed the number on Michael Williams's card. It rang 4 times, and I was about to hang up when a voice answered. "Williams and Associates, Michael Williams speaking." "Mr. Williams, my name is Vivian Banks. My husband was Thomas Banks. He left me your card." A pause. Then, "Mrs. Banks, I've been waiting for your call." Saturday morning, November 4th. I took the bus to Williams and Associates on Market Street, using $4.50 of my remaining cash for fare. The office was in a restored brownstone, 3 floors of polished wood and brass fixtures that spoke of old money and older connections. Michael Williams was 55 years old, with kind eyes and the bearing of someone who'd spent his career cleaning up other people's messes. His handshake was firm, his office immaculate. "Mrs. Banks, please sit. Can I offer you coffee?" "Just answers, Mr. Williams." He smiled slightly. "Fair enough?" He pulled a thick file from his desk drawer. "Your husband retained my services 8 months ago. He told me he was updating his estate plan and wanted someone outside his usual circles to handle it." "Outside his usual circles? You mean Douglas Harper?" "Precisely. Thomas was very specific. Harper was not to know about my involvement." My hands tightened on my purse. "Why?" "Because Thomas suspected his son was planning something. He didn't have proof, but he had instincts. And after 40 years in commercial real estate, Thomas's instincts were usually correct." Williams opened the file and pulled out a document. "This is your husband's actual will, executed on March 20th, 2023, 5 days after the fake one Douglas showed you." I stared at the document. My hands were shaking as I began to read. "I, Thomas Michael Banks, being of sound mind and body, do hereby revoke all previous wills and codicils. I declare this to be my last will and testament. To my beloved wife, Vivian Ann Banks. I leave the primary residence at 847 Oakwood Drive, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, free and clear, along with all furnishings and personal effects. Additionally, I bequeath to her 60% of all financial assets, investment accounts, and liquid holdings, currently valued at approximately $35 million, making her inheritance approximately $21 million. To my son, Carlton James Banks, I leave 40% of all financial assets, investment accounts, and liquid holdings, currently valued at approximately $14 million, to be held in trust with distributions beginning on his 45th birthday. However, this bequest to Carlton is contingent upon the following condition. He must not engage in any fraudulent activity, coercion, or abuse toward his mother within 2 years of my death. Should Carlton violate this condition, his entire inheritance shall revert to Vivian Ann Banks." The room spun. $21 million, I whispered. Plus the house, which is worth approximately $1.8 million, Williams added. Your husband was a wealthy man, Mrs. Banks, and he wanted to ensure you were taken care of. But Carlton showed me a different will. Douglas Harper confirmed it. That will is a forgery. A very good one. Someone with legal knowledge created it. But it's fake. Williams pulled out more documents. I have the original here, along with video testimony your husband recorded. Video testimony? He turned his laptop toward me. On the screen was Thomas, sitting in this very office, looking directly at the camera. Williams pressed play. Thomas's voice filled the room. Vivian, if you're watching this, it means Carlton has done what I feared. He's lied to you, manipulated you, probably convinced you that you're helpless without him. He's wrong. I've known for 3 years that our son has a problem with money. Not just spending it, stealing it. In 2020, he forged my signature on a $175,000 bank loan. I paid it off quietly. In 2021, he took $43,000 from my business account and claimed it was a clerical error. I let it slide. But 6 months ago, I learned something that I couldn't ignore. Carlton scammed Jessica's mother, Margaret Morrison, out of her entire life savings, $427,000, by promising to invest it in a guaranteed real estate deal. The deal never existed. He spent the money on gambling debts. Patricia is too ashamed to report it. Jessica either doesn't know or is in on it. I'm changing my will to protect you, Viv. If Carlton tries anything, and he will, he loses everything. The money comes to you. I'm sorry I didn't see this sooner. I'm sorry I raised a son who would hurt his own mother for money. But I'm not leaving you defenseless. The video ended. I sat in silence, processing. Then I asked the only question that mattered. Mr. Williams, what do I do now? He leaned back in his chair. First, we document everything Carlton has done. The illegal eviction, the forged will, the coercion. Then we go to the police. The police? Mrs. Banks, what your son has done isn't just unethical. It's criminal. Elder financial abuse, fraud, possibly conspiracy if Douglas Harper was complicit. He paused. But I'm going to be honest with you. This will be difficult. Carlton is a respected attorney. He'll have resources, expensive lawyers, and the burden of proof is on us. What kind of proof do we need? We need to show that the will he presented was fake. We need to show he knew it was fake. And ideally, we need him to admit it. I thought about Carlton's confidence, his arrogance, his absolute certainty that I was too stupid and too weak to fight back. Mr. Williams, I said slowly, I think I know how to get that admission, but I'm going to need help. He smiled. I know just the person. Her name is Patricia Green. She's a private investigator who specializes in family fraud cases. How soon can I meet her? How about Monday morning? I stood up, feeling steadier than I had in weeks. One more question. The money Carlton was supposed to inherit, the $14 million, if he loses it because of this condition, where does it go? To you. All of it. You wouldn't just get your $21 million, Mrs. Banks. You'd get the full $35 million. I nodded slowly. Then Carlton has already lost. He just doesn't know it yet. As I left Williams's office, I passed a mirror in the hallway and caught sight of myself, 68 years old, wearing a cardigan I'd owned for a decade, hair going gray, face lined with age and grief. I looked exactly like the harmless old woman Carlton thought I was. Good. That night, back in room 114 of the Sunset Inn, I couldn't sleep. Instead, I pulled out my phone and started searching. Carlton Banks, Philadelphia attorney, brought up his law firm profile. Whitmore & Associates, corporate law, J.D. from University of Pennsylvania Law School, specializing in estate planning and trust litigation. Estate planning and trust litigation. My son had spent his career learning exactly how to manipulate wills and trusts, and he'd used that knowledge against his own mother. I kept digging. 3 hours later, at 2:47 a.m., I found something that made my blood run cold. A legal notice from 2019, buried in Philadelphia County Court records. Patricia Louise Morrison versus Carlton James Banks. Civil complaint for fraud and breach of fiduciary duty. Case number 2019 CV 8847. Amount sought, $427,000. Case dismissed at plaintiff's request. January 15, 2020. Thomas had been right. Carlton had stolen from Jessica's mother, and Margaret Morrison had been too ashamed or too scared to pursue it. I screenshot everything and emailed it to myself. Then I opened a new search. Douglas Harper, attorney, Philadelphia. His firm website showed a glowing bio, 30 years of practice, specializing in estate planning, member of the Pennsylvania Bar Association. But when I searched Douglas Harper debt, I found something interesting. A notice from Pinehurst Country Club from 18 months ago, announcing that Douglas Harper's membership had been temporarily suspended pending resolution of financial obligations. Douglas had money problems, which meant Carlton could have bought his cooperation. I made a list of every detail I'd gathered. Carlton's expertise in estate law, means. His history of fraud with Jessica's mother, pattern. Douglas Harper's financial vulnerability, accomplice. Thomas's warning and protective measures, motive for fake will. The suspiciously quick timeline from death to eviction, urgency. By 4:32 a.m. I had 17 pages of notes on my phone, and I had a plan forming. Carlton thought he was playing chess with an amateur. What he didn't know was that I'd spent 44 years married to Thomas Banks, watching him negotiate multi-million-dollar deals, learning how power really worked. I'd just been too polite to use those lessons. Until now. Monday, November 6th, 10:02 a.m. Williams & Associates. Patricia Green was 39, looked like a yoga instructor, but had the eyes of someone who'd seen every kind of lie. Former police detective turned private investigator specializing in family fraud. Mrs. Banks, my rate is $175 an hour. For your case, we're looking at about 4 weeks and $15,000 total. I had $282.50 left. I don't have that. I'll work on contingency. When you get your inheritance, I get paid. She leaned forward. 3 years ago, my mother lost $180,000 to a financial scammer. Elder abuse is personal for me. Plus, I really want to nail a lawyer who thinks he's untouchable. Over the next week, Patricia worked methodically. She followed Carlton to expensive lunches, $83 average per meal, photographed him moving into my house with $31,000 in new furniture, and posed as a potential client asking about elderly mothers who don't understand finances. Carlton's recorded response: "The kindest thing is to minimize their direct control. That way she's protected from her own poor decisions." By week's end, Patricia had established pattern and mindset. Patricia's connections delivered fast. Week 2 discoveries. Carlton's credit report. $2.3 million in debt. Not $1.8 million as I'd thought. Including $400,000 borrowed from a loan shark named Vincent Calabrese at 18% interest. Douglas Harper's bank statements. 3 deposits from Carlton totaling $110,000. Paid on March 10th, $50K, September 25th, $25K, and October 15th, $35K. Property records for 847 Oakwood Drive, joint tenancy between Thomas and Vivian Banks. Meaning you already owned the house the moment Thomas died, Patricia explained. Carlton's been committing trespassing and illegal eviction. Week 3 confirmation. Dr. Raymond Chen, forensic document examiner. The signature on Carlton's will shows none of the tremor consistent with Thomas's heart condition. It's a forgery. Textbook case. Ruth Morrison, Carlton's former secretary. He had me draft fake documents, including a will for your husband, 3 months before Thomas died. I kept a photo as insurance. She showed us. The fake will, dated before Thomas's death. Carlton had planned this before my husband even died. December 1st. Patricia and I approached Douglas Harper at his house. He looked exhausted, defeated. "Vivian, I owe you an apology." In his office the next morning, me wearing a hidden recorder, Douglas confessed everything. Carlton had discovered Douglas's $183,000 gambling debt 18 months ago. offered $50,000 to help with estate planning. When Thomas died, Carlton paid another $60,000 for Douglas to present the fake will as legitimate. Carlton said Thomas really wanted it this way, Douglas said, crying. I wanted to believe him, but I knew. God help me, I knew. Will you testify? Yes, if you help me avoid prison. He gave me copies of Carlton's payments, text messages, and one handwritten note from Carlton. Make sure she never questions this. She's not smart enough to know the difference. Not smart enough. December 5th, Patricia's plan. Call Carlton. Say you've accepted the situation and want to discuss accessing your $50,000. He'll believe it, because his ego won't let him imagine you've been investigating him for a month. I called from a burner phone. Carlton, could we meet? Antonio's restaurant tomorrow at 7 o'clock p.m. Sure, Mom, I'll be there. Patricia set up 3 hidden cameras at the restaurant. A detective would be at the bar. Michael Williams would monitor audio from outside. December 6th, 7:00 p.m. Carlton arrived in his 1,800 suit, confident, relaxed. We ordered. I chose the $16 pasta and made small talk until I said, Carlton, I need to access my $50,000. I'm running out of money. Of course. I'll have Jessica write you a check, say $5,000 to start. I was hoping for $20,000. He frowned. Mom, that's a lot. The estate is complicated. The $50,000 isn't just sitting in an account. It's tied up. $5,000 should last you months if you're careful. If I'm careful. Carlton, I don't understand. We were married 44 years. How did I end up with only $50,000? Because you never worked. You didn't contribute financially. Dad knew you'd mismanage large amounts. He was protecting you from yourself. So he left me $50,000 and you got everything. Not just me. I'm managing it for the family. Dad trusted me with his legacy. I pulled out my phone. That's interesting. Because on March 15th, the day you said Dad signed the will, Thomas and I were at Philadelphia General for his heart appointment from 1 o'clock to 5:30 p.m. I have the confirmation. Carlton's face stilled. Maybe I got the date wrong. Or maybe the will was signed when Dad wasn't present. And maybe that's why Douglas Harper deposited $50,000 from your account on March 10th, 5 days before the will date. I don't know about Douglas's finances. Did you pay him to create a fake will? This is insane. Did you pay him $110,000 total? Stop it. Did you forge Dad's signature and throw your 68-year-old mother out to steal $35 million? It's not stealing. He shouted loud enough that nearby diners turned. Carlton lowered his voice, but the damage was done. It's not stealing when you're preventing someone from wasting a fortune. Dad didn't have time to update the paperwork before he died. I was just making official what he really wanted. What he wanted or what you wanted? Same thing. You ordered water at a nice restaurant because you're too cheap to spend money. That's exactly why Dad didn't trust you. So you made the decision for him? Yes. Carlton sat back, calmer. Mom, listen. You'll be fine. I'll take care of you. Monthly allowance, comfortable life. But the estate needs professional management. The will I showed you is what Dad would have written if he'd had time. Even if it wasn't what he actually did. The will is legal, filed with probate court. Douglas verified it. You can't afford a lawyer to contest it anyway. What about Jessica's mother, Margaret Morrison? The $427,000 you stole from her? His face went white. That's none of your business. Did you promise to pay her back from Dad's estate? Carlton stood. This conversation is over. You're listening to some scam artist. Get a real apartment, Mom. Stop living in that motel. It's embarrassing. He walked out. I looked at Patricia, who held up her phone. 14 minutes, 37 seconds of Carlton admitting everything. The detective at the bar followed Carlton outside. By the time Carlton reached his BMW, Detective Rachel Foster was waiting with an arrest warrant. I watched through the window as she read him his rights. Carlton looked back and saw me standing there. He understood. 2 days later, Jessica knocked on my motel room door. Carlton's been arrested, she said. He thinks you've lost your mind. What do you think? I think I've been waiting 5 years for someone to prove what he really is. She handed me a USB drive. Emails between Carlton and Douglas planning the will. Evidence of Carlton's gambling debts. All $2.3 million proof he stole from 3 other clients. Text messages with a loan shark. And a recording from 2 years ago where Carlton said when his father died, he'd handle things so that old bitch gets nothing. Why are you giving this to me? Because I want justice for my mother. Because I want a divorce and full custody. And because Carlton needs to be destroyed. She moved toward the door. Use it. I'll testify to whatever you need. Then, on January 20th, 2024, a woman walked into Williams & Associates. Mrs. Banks, my name is Emily Patterson. I'm 44 years old. She paused. And I'm your daughter. I couldn't breathe. Emily explained, given up for adoption September 3rd, 1979. Found me through DNA testing 5 years ago. Watched from a distance, not wanting to disrupt my life. But when she saw the news about Carlton's case, she decided to help. I want to testify, she said, about who you are. About the fact that giving me up because you had no other choice doesn't make you weak. It makes you strong. We held hands across the table and cried for 44 lost years. February 12th, 2024, Philadelphia County Courthouse. Angela Morrison, 33-year-old prosecutor, presented methodically. Dr. Chen's forensic proof of forgery. Douglas Harper's testimony about bribes. Patricia Green's investigation. Bank records showing $110,000 in payments. Ruth Morrison describing how she drafted fake documents before Thomas died. Email from Carlton. Make it look clean. Mother is clueless. By day 3, Carlton's defense was crumbling. Richard Sterling, Carlton's $500 an hour attorney, put him on the stand. Mr. Banks, did you love your father? Very much. Did you forge his will? No. The will reflects what Dad wanted. He trusted me to manage his legacy because Mom never understood finances. Angela's cross-examination destroyed him. You paid Douglas Harper $110,000. He testified it was for presenting a fake will. Are you calling a 30-year attorney a liar? He's trying to save himself. Angela showed the email. Make it look clean. Mother is clueless. Did you write that? I was frustrated. You also wrote, this is our chance to do what my father should have done. Cut her out properly. Who is our? The family. You meant you and Douglas Harper. How much gambling debt do you have, Mr. Banks? Maybe $100,000 or $2.3 million? Angela presented bank records. You needed money desperately. Your father's death provided opportunity. So you forged a will, bribed a lawyer, and threw your mother out to cover your debts. True? No. You also stole $427,000 from Jessica's mother. After doing that, why wouldn't you steal from your own mother? Carlton had no answer. Your Honor, we call Emily Patterson. The courtroom gasped when Emily explained she was my biological daughter. When you found your birth mother, what did you discover? Angela asked. That she gave me up because she had no other choice. She was 23, alone with no resources. She chose adoption because she loved me. That's not weakness. That's strength. Have you met the defendant? No, and after researching what he's done to our mother, I have no interest. Our mother? Yes, Carlton is my half-brother, and he should be ashamed. The jury deliberated 7 hours. On all counts, guilty. Judge Martha Reynolds sentenced Carlton to 5 years in federal prison, eligible for parole after 3 with good behavior, plus $250,000 fine and permanent disbarment. Douglas Harper received 1 year house arrest for cooperation. I woke up in my renovated bedroom at 847 Oakwood Drive, sunlight through new windows. Thomas's study was now my art studio. The formal dining room was a library. Emily and her family were visiting. Sophie and Max came monthly. Jessica had full custody and was rebuilding her life. Patricia arrived with coffee. Ready to review foundation proposals? The Margaret and Thomas Banks Foundation for Elder Protection had launched in July with $5 million in funding. We had 47 active cases helping seniors facing family fraud. At lunch, Emily asked, "Do you regret pursuing Carlton so aggressively?" "No, he needed to face consequences. I spent 44 years making myself small in my marriage. I wasn't going to do the same with my son." "Do you still love him?" "Yes, but love doesn't mean accepting abuse." November 3rd, 2025. Exactly 2 years since my eviction. The Foundation's first annual gala at the Bellevue Hotel. 250 guests, $500 per plate. I stood at the podium in my $800 purple dress. 2 years ago, I was sleeping in a motel believing I was powerless. Today, I'm here because I learned. Age isn't weakness. Experience isn't ignorance. And being underestimated is the greatest strategic advantage. Applause filled the ballroom. Someone asked if I regret pursuing charges against my son. The answer is no, because the most loving thing I could do, for him and myself, was prove that actions have consequences. Even family, especially family. Later on the hotel balcony, Emily handed me champagne. "You did good, Mom." "We did good," I corrected. We looked out at Philadelphia's skyline. Carlton was still in prison, his parole hearing in 6 months. I didn't know yet if I'd write a support letter, but whatever I decided would be my choice. Not guilt, not obligation, my choice. "Mom," Emily said, "that's growth." We stayed there until midnight, mother and daughter, planning next year's gala. At 69 years old, I'd finally learned the most important lesson. You're never too old to become who you were meant to be. And for the first time in my life, I felt completely, entirely, authentically myself. My phone buzzed. Carlton's 24th collect call from prison. I looked at Emily. Should I answer? "Do you want to?" I thought about the woman I'd been 2 years ago, sleeping in a motel, convinced she was helpless. Then I thought about the woman I'd become, running a foundation, painting in my studio, drinking $47 wine because I'd learned I deserved nice things. "Not today," I said. "Maybe tomorrow, maybe never, but it'll be my decision." Emily smiled. "That's exactly right." I silenced the call and turned back to the city lights. At 69, I'd discovered something more valuable than $35 million. I was enough, just Vivian, and that was everything. The end.